Hey everyone, Cody here, and I wanted to share something kind of exciting with you. It's something I came up with, and I call it the conflict and resolution theory, or the problem and solution theory. And this is basically my entire outlook of life, the whole purpose or meaning or point of life. And so I'm going to share that with you. And so basically, it goes something like this: that life is simply a series of conflicts, and our role is to resolve them. Or, a little more simply put, that life is full of problems and we were made to solve them. Okay, so that is basically our whole point of living, is to solve conflicts or solve problems. Now, I came up with this idea and this theory because recently I was really kind of taking stock of my life and where it was going, and things like that. And I noticed that when I made decisions about things, or when I just kind of knocked things out, whether I wanted to face them or not, I felt like my life was progressing. Now, sometimes I would make a good decision and my life would progress forward and it felt like I was making good progress. And sometimes I made a bad decision and it felt like my life was progressing backwards or regressing. It was going back. But either way, it felt like there was movement in my life, like things were actually getting done. When I didn't put things off, or when I didn't put them on the fence or kind of put them on the back burner, I felt like my life was progressing. And I've looked back at all the times in my life where I made large decisions, or when I overcame an obstacle that I was faced with, I actually felt accomplished. And I can remember those times because they were milestones in my life. When I overcame obstacles, then I felt like I had actually moved forward and learned from that thing. Or when I let something defeat me, then I can remember those times of defeat as well, because I didn't resolve that conflict. So honestly, I really feel that life is nothing but a series of conflicts, day to day, year to year, century to century. That's all we've ever been made for, was to resolve conflicts. Every day is presented to us as a series of conflicts. So let me kind of get into how this affects us, or really what I noticed about this, and why I'm bringing this up. Okay, so I've already kind of talked about how when I overcame things, then it really became a conflict. It became resolution of that thing, and there was progress. So that's the first part of it, that when we resolve conflicts or problems, when we solve problems. Now, I say conflicts as opposed to just problems, because problem just indicates a bad thing, right? But conflict really just means that it's not something that is smooth, right? If there's a conflict, that means it goes against you. And when you have to make choices, every choice that we make, I feel like, is conflict. But I'm going to come back to that. So let me come back to my initial statement that, making or resolving conflict is really what we're made for, because anytime I've done it, I felt like that was progress. Whether it was the right decision and I moved forward, or wrong decision and moved back, there was movement. So I felt like that my life was moving somewhere, whether it was the right direction or not. But when I didn't make decisions, or when I swept something under the rug, or when I put something away or brushed it aside, when I let something linger, or when I had something impending that was coming up that I was super worried about, all of these things were unresolved conflict. And see, these things were just weighing on me in my mind. So anytime I've held on to past things, present things, or future things, for example, when I held on to past hurts, that was unresolved conflict, and it weighed on me. And when I held on to present issues, like things that were going on that right now, that day, then that was unresolved conflict, because I would keep thinking about it. And when I thought about future events that worried me, that was unresolved conflict. And anytime I've been in a situation where I had unresolved conflict in my mind, it really affected me, because really what it does is it does two things. One, it kind of takes up space in your brain, and two, it really limits your ability to accomplish the things that you need to do. So it hinders you right now. So let me give you a good example to kind of think about this, to imagine it. Imagine it. So our brains are kind of like computers, right? And so our brains, it takes in information, it processes, and then it makes, there's an input, and then a process, and then an output. So it's very much like a computer. So when you have unresolved conflict, when you are faced with a conflict, you basically you can either make a choice or not make a choice. And even by not making a choice, you're really making a choice not to make that choice. But regardless, let's say that you don't resolve a conflict. You're asked a question, where do you want to go to eat? And you could say, oh, let's just go here, right? And then you've resolved that conflict, so it's done. Or you could say, I don't know, let me think about it. Well, then now that thing just became unresolved. All right. So unresolved conflict in your brain is just like a program running in the background of a computer. So I don't know about you, but Skype always loads up on Windows for me. Every time I load Windows, Skype is there. And I don't even get the option to turn it off. It's just there. Now I don't care about Skype, and I don't really care about it enough to really go into that. But my point is that when my computer starts up, it's already running right off the bat. And so it's running in the background, and I'm not even using it. I have no plan of using Skype. But my point out of that is that it does two things. One, that program is taking up space on my computer. So it's taking up hard drive space. It's taking up space for files. But it's taking up space so that that's less space I could use for more important things. Two, it's also running in the background. So Skype may not use a whole lot of processing power, especially when it's not really being used. However, it is taking some processing power. So it means it's taking that processing power away from more important programs, or programs that I actually need to run. So it's doing two things. One, it's taking up space, and two, it's running in the background, which means I have less processing power to use it, right? And so unresolved conflict is the same exact way with people. Because when you have something that you constantly think about that has not been resolved, whether it's a relational issue or money or health or a future event, when you have unresolved conflict, that stuff is running in the background of your mind. And when you wake up in the morning, if it's not resolved, eventually it will come up because it's not resolved, so it's still in your brain and it's running in the background. So one, it's taking up space because you have to continue to think about it because it just keeps coming up. So obviously it hasn't been filed away because it's still up and running. And the second thing is that it's using your brain power because it keeps pulling your mind back to that thing. Oh, I got to remember to do this thing. And that's okay. That's okay. My point only is that, if you don't resolve a conflict, it becomes unresolved, and then it stays in your brain. So my point out of all that is to resolve as many conflicts as possible, unless you're using it for a good reason. So I'll come back to good unresolved conflict in a little bit, because there is a way to use it. But let's come back to the theory. So life is a series of problems that we must solve. Now, again, I don't mean that every issue, every little bad thing is a problem or a conflict. I mean literally every choice that you make is due to conflict. And I believe that every choice we make is a result of and a response to conflict. So right now, the choice to come in here and record this video is a response to conflict, because I have a conflict in me to share this idea with you. I have this conflict in me to really share the ideas that I have, because I think that they're valuable. I think that this video is valuable. So I'm sharing it with you because I had that conflict and I was faced with it. Now, I could have just not done it, but here I am sharing it with you. But I want to kind of come back to that. So if every choice that we make is a result of and is in response to conflict, what does that mean? Well, think about just the clothes that you're wearing, just the idea to wear clothes every day. So every day, you're faced with that idea, do I need to wear clothes? Or maybe you wear the same clothes, that's fine. You could use some other example. But for most of us, am I going to wear clothes today? Well, it's got to start there. Am I going to wear clothes? So, and you could loop this even further back or further forward, but let's just start there. So, what do I wear? Let's just start there. So, before you can even get to what do I wear, it's am I going to wear clothes today? Now, for most of us, it's going to be yes. If you can get away with not wearing clothes, hey, more power to you. But let's say that the answer is yes. Well, you've just resolved a mini conflict. You've said yes. But the problem with conflict is that conflict is never truly resolved. Or even if you resolve a conflict, it leads to more conflict, which I'm going to kind of come back to. Okay? So you resolve the one conflict where you said, yes, I do need to wear clothes. But then it branches off into things like, do I wear something fashionable or do I wear something that is functional? And then even between those, you could say neither or both, right? Or some other thing, some other wild tangent. But even then, when you get into those things, okay, I choose both. Okay, well now is that clothing that I'm going to wear, is it something that society would approve of? Or is it something that fits with my beliefs or the customs I grew up in or the season I'm in or the place I live? There's so many different factors. Now, it doesn't really matter, what you say yes and no to, all of those things. But these are all mini conflicts because every choice that you're making is going to resolve one conflict but also create another. So life is a series of conflicts that we must resolve. Now, that being the case, I'd really like to kind of come to the whole point out of this video that yes, life is a series of conflicts. Now, the point out of all of this that I'd like to make is that yes, I believe that life is a series of conflicts and we were created by God, but that our whole life, the meaning of life is to resolve conflicts. Now, we might go about this the right way or the wrong way or maybe some kind of neutral way. That part, it does matter in the long run, but the point out of that is that we will always, always, always be faced with conflict. There will never be a point in your life where you don't face some kind of conflict. Now, I know that this sounds bad. It sounds kind of like a drag, a downer. But my point is that, we were made to resolve conflict, not to avoid it. And since we were made to resolve conflict, like I said, there will never be a time in your life where you'll never be faced with any type of conflict, because even if you resolve a conflict, that resolution will lead into some other set of conflicts. You'll never, have enough resources or live in a certain place or be around these certain people or whatever and not face some kind of conflict. If you avoid conflict, that creates conflict. And then if you resolve conflict, that, creates conflict. So you may say, well, then life is not worth living because, if I'm resolving one thing, but then creating more conflict, why even live? What is the point of even going through life? The whole point out of all this is that, yes, life is a series of conflicts, but conflicts are really just opportunities for us to grow. You see, every time you overcome a conflict, you grow. And every time you resolve a conflict, you grow as a person because you overcame an obstacle. And this is why I say you could also call it the problem solving theory. Because every solution you come up with a problem, yes, you are going to come up to another problem, but sometimes those problems are the same problem. And once you've resolved that one thing once, you resolve it again a lot easier the second time. Or maybe you come to something else that you've never faced before, but because you have experience in resolving that conflict some other way, it gives you an idea of how to overcome that. So the whole point of life is to resolve conflict. At least that is my theory and opinion. And this is a good thing because this is how we grow as people. It's not by putting them off, it's by overcoming them the best that we can. Look, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to choose the wrong path. Everybody does it. There is not a person on this earth that does not make mistakes. Every person that you ever see that looks like they've got it all together, that's wrong, that's false. Do not believe that every person has it all together or they don't face some kind of difficulty or something. They're either A, putting it off, or B, they're not being honest about it. Every person will face some kind of challenge or difficulty or whatever. And if you think living on an island or being surrounded by wealth or certain people is going to eliminate all your problems, it's not. Okay? Life is conflict. Now I want to finish up with the point that I talked about earlier with unresolved conflict and how there's good in unresolved conflict. Unresolved conflict can be good because it can be a motivator, but it also can be used as a weapon for good for you. So how do you do that? Well, let's talk about the motivation aspect. First, it's a good motivator because it reminds us that something needs to be done. And if that unresolved conflict is a large thing and it keeps coming back to your mind, say you had a falling out with someone and you know that it needs to be resolved before it's too late. You know, maybe time has passed, years have passed, who knows? But you know that that needs to be mended. Well, it's a good motivator because it's reminding us that, hey, we have work to do and we need to get that done. And the longer you put off something, the longer it's going to sit in your brain and it's just going to continue to use up valuable resources. I mean, your mind is incredible, and when you leave that unresolved conflict in there, it just continues to use your brain power every day. And we only have a certain amount of brain power every day. After a certain amount of time throughout the day, you start to check out. And I'm sure you felt that feeling where you just sit there and you just don't want to think anymore. You don't want to focus on whatever it is you're focusing on because you've checked out. So, you know, we only have so much brain power every day. Why waste it continuously thinking about something that is unresolved? Unless, coming to the second part of this on how we can use it for good, unless that thing is to remind us to resolve that conflict. Okay, so instead of allowing it to be a weapon against us, saying, hey, this isn't done, why aren't you doing this? It's, hey, this isn't done, don't forget to finish this. Now, I talked about this in my video about how Stephen King writes books and how he will tell himself a story over and over and over again, but he won't write it down because when he writes it, as soon as you write something down, you've almost kind of resolved that conflict in your brain if it's an idea. Because once you write it down, you've released it from your brain. But as long as you keep an idea in your head and you just keep dwelling on it, it's unresolved. And so this is what he does. But you can use this to your advantage because you can use it for a couple of things. One, you can use it to remind yourself of something that needs to happen. You know, I would do this before I went to bed. I would tell myself something over and over and over again so that when I woke up in the morning, I remembered. Now I'm a lot smarter and I just put a note somewhere where I'll see it. But you can use it that way. The other example of this is solving problems, which is what life is about. So if you ever have an issue on something and you don't know where to turn, or you just want to come up with a solution in your own, in your own mind or something like that, simply tell yourself that problem over and over and over again. And you can use the process of unresolved conflict in your brain to continuously try to come up with a solution. Your brain is always working, and if you keep presenting problems to it, it will eventually give you a solution. Now, I can't say whether that solution is good or bad. You may need to consult with other people, or if you feel self-confident and self-reliant, you can act on that decision yourself. But that is how you can use unresolved conflict for good and not to allow it to be used against you as a weapon by your own mind. Okay, so that is it. That is the conflict resolution theory in a nutshell. That's pretty much everything that I had down and wanted to say. I don't think that, I don't think that I had anything else for that. So it's simply that life is full of problems or conflicts, and our role as people, our whole life, is to resolve those conflicts. And as we continue to resolve those conflicts instead of putting them off, we will grow as people, and it will make us better. And as you continue to resolve those conflicts, who knows how many people those other resolved conflicts will affect. That is it, guys. I apologize for the sort of long video, but if it made sense, I really hope it did. But I just wanted to share this with you because it felt like it needed to be shared. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really appreciate your time, and I'll catch you guys in another one. Take care, guys.